One of the things that I'm struck by is the difference between what you do and say what, free porn, which is around everywhere. The biggest difference, as far as I can tell, is that people can interact with you. Whereas when it's just a video, they are a passive observer kind of from afar. But there's something to, at least it seems to me, when people are paying, they want that interaction. Is that right? Am I reading what goes on with OnlyFans?
No, that's absolutely correct. Right. I mean,
so what do they want out of that interaction?
And like the approval of a woman is very common. So there's a lot of things. It's like a nuanced sort of ball of motivations that drives men towards OnlyFans or camming or like this intimacy sort of thing. And a lot of it's sex, you have urges. But like the reason that it's OnlyFans and not like typical porn is because like there is this feeling that somebody sees you, like an attractive woman sees you and says like, yes, that is what I want, sexually speaking. And I think that's like deeply important for the psychology of everybody, but like men more so than women. And so, yeah, it feels like that fulfills some sort of need for them to be like really accepted by the opposite gender.
Can you see the people that are contributing money to you?
No, not on OnlyFans. It depends. Sometimes it's possible, but typically not.
And so what have you learned about, I think it's so interesting because I'm a man that has been around many, many men, and like I have very deep discussions, I would say, venturing into areas that would be normally taboo with a lot of people. But you have a very different view, right? You've seen men being vulnerable in a way that I never will. What have you learned about men that somebody that hasn't seen this much intimacy wouldn't know?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're really humanizing. I think a lot of people who view this sort of thing from the outside view it like with disgust, like men are pigs and women are victims sometimes, or women are exploiting men. And this is true to some degree. Like often there is exploitation that goes on. Like it's two people using each other to, get their needs met. One is financial and one is sexual. So I'm not going to deny that. But like, I think people don't understand like the degree of loneliness that men have. And like, it's just like a drive to be accepted, like a drive to be loved in this particular way. Because a lot of men can find acceptance like through other men or friends or something, but it's such an important need. I think it's very similar to like women's needs to be attractive. Like people are always like, beauty standards or whatever. And this is sort of like we have the feeling of value when we're desired by other people, and men have exactly the same thing. They're just really desperately looking to be desired, and this feels like human and sad sometimes and good sometimes for me. And I wish that there was more of this compassion for that side of men that was present in the discourse around sex work. And this is to some degree I find that what I do to be very fulfilling. Not always. Sometimes they're like, hey, baby, like show me a picture of your asshole. And it's not super fulfilling. But I mean, I used to do like in-person sex work as well. And I remember I used to hold men as they cried sometimes, because that's just what they needed. And like skin to skin contact. It was like we would get naked and it wasn't sexual. And I would just hold him and it was like being a baby. And I love that. Like, and I wish I could do that for so many other people.
A couple of weeks ago, I had somebody on and we were talking about this theory called bare branches theory in international relations. And what it is a fact of human nature, which is 50% of men will not be sexually successful, like they won't have children. And we forget in our society that there are just huge swaths of men that, like you said, they're never touched. They never have intimate engagement. They don't have a woman looking at them saying, I see you. In fact, when you get to a certain level in the hierarchy status, when you're down so low, you don't even want women to look at you, right? You have a hard time making that eye contact. And a friend of mine pointed out something that I had not thought of, which is when the atomic bomb happened. So the way that it used to be that a country would have to deal with their bare branches, because eventually you get so many unmarried men that have no hope of getting up in the hierarchy that they end up joining gangs, getting involved in banditry, going and causing civil insurrection. So this has happened in places like China, in the Middle East, all over the world, really. But with the invention of the atomic bomb, we no longer go to war where masses of men that are unattached are killed. And so now we have this proliferation of bare branches, and something has to fill this in some way. And I have to wonder if the work that you're in, or the need that you're filling, is actually filling a gap created by the atomic bomb in a weird way.
Yeah, I would be curious about that. I mean, to some degree, like prostitution has been around, it's very old, before the atomic bomb. So obviously there's been some sort of excess. But I wonder to what degree it's been like emphasized by stuff like this. And it reminds me of war in general, right? Like men used to have like a very important and valuable function, which is if you go to war. And this was sort of like more ingrained in sort of our atmospheric, like, oh, I know Joe like 10 years ago died in the war. Like that was sort of just the way that people operated. And now it's not very clear what men are like good for, you know, in this evolutionary way. So like men have stopped playing this role because we don't need that role anymore, but women are still playing a role that we need, which is reproduction. So I think that there's just asymmetry. I think this is likely why we're seeing certain strains of feminism going really big, because like what are men doing, you know, is the question. And you know, this sucks. It really sucks for men to like not have a clear reason why society should value them. And I agree that like the overabundance, like this is not, it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're entering a phase where we will have to have some sort of giant phase change, because the role of the burly man that locks in his feelings but goes and gets the work done because his body was actually a tool, we seem to have transcended. And yet you still have all those people out there. You still have the genetic selection where you've got big guys that have the urges and the testosterone and the energy, and yet there's no place for them in a cosmopolitan world where you're valued for your white collar work or for the creativity that you have. And so I don't know how our society will deal with this, because just like you were saying, feminism is evolving very quickly because women have filled a different role, and there's not this place for men, and they're kind of in this weird amorphous state where 50% of them are going to be just blocked out of it.
Right. And there's like a subtle distinction I want to make here. Like very often the response to this is sort of an anger at, you know, the progression of society. Like, oh, we're going down a bad path, and, you know, we need to bring it back to the old values. We need to make men men again. And I sympathize with this urge. I don't think that this is the way to go. Like when evolution moves, like say you get like a strong environmental change, and then like a population is going to go through like a lot of die-off and a lot of like struggles to be alive until they like modify to fit the environment. And I think this is what we're going through. We have a strong environment shift, and the answer is not to undo the environment. It's impossible. There's too many incentives like wrapped up. We can't undo the internet and, you know, not having war. So yeah, it's really shitty that we're now having to like these growing pains of a population like trying to figure out how to modify themselves and leaving a whole lot of people behind. And I think it's like a fine line to walk between like accepting that and moving forward and like figuring out how to integrate, and also maintaining compassion for like the damage that this is doing to people. But that doesn't mean that it's a wrong motion that we're making.
Well, I mean, it also reflects to women as well. Like in your line of work with sex work, like that has always been a part of our society. Prostitution, it's certainly in the Bible. It's in all different ancient books. But there's an interesting thing about the evolution towards women being more liberated in this way, or being able to take control of their sexuality, in that are you familiar with the concept of the Ouroboros, right? The snake that's eating its own tail.
Yeah.
It's the symbol.
I actually never heard it said out loud before.
I think that's how you pronounce
Ouroboros,
it.
Ouroboros.
Yeah, Ouroboros. And it's it's an interesting thing, because when I found out that I was having a daughter, I had a vision that would be as close to the angel singing and the image of the Ouroboros there. And that being this very sacred role that women play for being able to create a universe. I mean, you are able to, with your body, potentially able to create another human being.
It's crazy.
Do you think sex work in some way demeans your role as Ouroboros, or is that one that you can choose not to fulfill? That's a really heavy question.
Yeah, I mean, the word demeans has a lot packed into it, and like according to some traditions, like it is demeaning. Like a lot of people perceive what I do as demeaning myself. And in that framework, that is true. Like, I understand how that would make sense given like the way that you view the world. I don't think this is true in the way that I view the world. Like, for one, I could still reproduce, and two, like it's still fulfilling an important societal function. Like, the word demeaning like doesn't feel like it really resonates with the sort of things that I've experienced in sex work. It might for other people, but like, I just don't really operate according to that way of viewing the world.
That's totally fair. Like the when I use the word demeaning, that's probably, totally unfair. I guess my point about it is, do you feel as though the Ouroboros is the role that all women must fulfill? And it doesn't sound like it does.
So to clarify, by Ouroboros, do you mean reproduction?
I don't know. Actually, like, I think that this symbol, it means more than just reproduction, but I don't know.
Well, then I'm not sure I understand fully what you mean. Could you explain?
So you've had some very interesting writing about the differences between men and women, and we were just talking about like the gender roles. Do you think there is something intrinsic to being a woman that by doing sex work, it takes you out of the league of the other women that you see around you that are not in sex work?
Out of the league. I mean, yeah, it feels like I'm doing a different thing, like a different strategy or whatever. Like, a lot of women like try to maintain resources by marriage, and like hooking a man in, like a singular, like a centralized source generator or something. And I'm very decentralized. I'm like the crypto of woman. Like, it's just like a little bit from a lot.
Wow. Okay, that's super interesting. So, thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.